Back with you here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast. With you as always, Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star. I'm Soren Petro from Sports Radio 810 WHB. Doing a deep dive here on Patrick Mahomes. Where does he rank all time right now as far as legacy goes? How much did that Super Bowl loss affect his legacy? Towards the negative. What letter grade would you give Mahomes for the 24 season? Will he return to his prolific numbers? 2018, 2022, over 5,000 yards, over 40 touchdowns in both seasons. Can we see a return like that? Where does he need to improve if he's going to involve in the later stages of his career? Are the Chiefs putting enough around him? What does Mahomes look like without Travis Kelce? We know that's coming pretty soon. What are reasonable expectations for the next 8 years? We've seen the first 8. What do we expect over the next 8? And where does Patrick Mahomes rank all time when his career is over? We're discussing it right now here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.
You are listening to the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, the most in-depth analysis of the Kansas City Chiefs on planet Earth, breaking down the Chiefs like no one else can. Red, Gold, and Bold is hosted by Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro. Jeff Chadiha is a senior columnist and on-air personality for the NFL Network and NFL.com. Sam McDowell is a columnist for the Kansas City Star. Soren Petro is the afternoon drive host of the program on Sports Radio 810 WHB in Kansas City. The Red, Gold, and Bold podcast is proudly brought to you by Gann Asphalt and Concrete, Kansas City's nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor, making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty. Find them online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, one contractor, all things parking lot. Now, here are the hosts of the Best Chiefs podcast, Jeff Chadiha, Sam McDowell, and Soren Petro.
Thank you very much, Curtis. We do appreciate it. Off and running here with the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, talking about Patrick Mahomes, not the best statistical season that he has ever had, gentlemen. Let's dive into where we think he is now. 8 seasons in. Where does he rank all time in your mind, Jeff? Now that he's, getting ready to touch 30. Next time he steps on the field, I think he'll still be 29. Second time he steps on the field in the regular season game next year, he'll be 30. Where's he sit right now all time?
Oh, I had him number 2 last year, and he's still number 2 for me. Brady number 1, and I'd put Peyton Manning at 3. I like, what he's done throughout his career, obviously, with the championships and the MVPs and the clutch moments and the numbers he's compiled. He's got a ton of records, and so you can't really overlook that. But, I'm starting to feel like, are we halfway through his career already? Are we reaching a point where we've gotten so accustomed to guys like Tom Brady playing into their 40s and Aaron Rodgers is doing it now? But I still think that's not the norm. I still think most guys are going to start to taper off and shut it down around 37, 38, 39. So I feel pretty comfortable saying he's the second best quarterback I've ever seen, even at this early stage of his career.
Okay. That's pretty high praise because and he's taken a step. I know we did something like this with Eager a couple of years ago, and maybe it's been several years. I can't remember what it was, but that is high praise to put him definitively at number 2. And we have a tendency. I think the record book has been completely rewritten, right? With Tom Brady playing into his mid-40s, Aaron Rodgers is, Drew Brees got to 40. Aaron Rodgers is in his 40s and apparently going to sign again. So, but I'll point out, it seemed like Dan Marino played forever. 38 was his last season, So if you put 8 more years, maybe he's not quite halfway. Maybe he's halfway of his effective years, Sam, right? Like there'll be he can still be a game manager type guy at the end, and maybe the Chiefs are walking away and he's signing with the Colts to try to, give them a run into the playoffs. But I think that is interesting. I mean, it might be halfway. It might be a little past halfway for being the best of the best. But where do you think he ranks right now?
Yeah, I think he's second as well. But to what you just said, like Brady won Super Bowls at age 37, 39, 41, and 45. And I don't think that anyone in NFL history is going to do that again. But I will say, if you're looking for the best Patrick Mahomes praise you can have at this stage, is he's clearly been the best quarterback in NFL history before he was 30 in terms of his whole resume, regular season and playoffs combined, because the playoff numbers for anyone else pre-30 are just incredibly different. He's got 2,500 more yards than anyone else had before 30 in the playoffs. He's got 21 more playoff touchdowns than anyone else had before 30. Like, it's not close with what he's accomplished before he's 30 years old, when you add in 3 Super Bowl MVPs as well. But the resume is still a long way overall from where Tom Brady is. Like, he's second, and he could get to 1, but I'm just saying right now, if he were to have just played his last game, he's a distant second still.
I brought up Dan Marino, and Dan Marino and Peyton Manning kind of got lumped together until Peyton Manning won a couple of championships, right? And then Peyton distanced himself from there. But I think what's interesting about Dan Marino is the cautionary tale for a lot of people is Dan Marino had a lot of black ink. If you go to the reference sites, Pro Football, pro-football-reference.com. If no one's ever looked at it, you're new to this podcast, go check it out. A lot of great stuff, but it's like the old baseball encyclopedias we used to have. You don't remember, Sam. Jeff and I will remember these huge voluminous books of all the stats, and they would update them each year. Now everything's there and updated with every game. But black ink is listed for guys that are league leaders. And, Dan Marino has all kinds of black ink, leading the league in, his second year, third year, fourth year, sixth year in completions, attempts, yards, touchdowns, all these great numbers. Then he really only had a couple other times that he appeared on there, and they were usually total passes, passes attempted type of things. Only led the league in yardage one other time. And so just because you've had this great start that you just mentioned, Sam, doesn't mean that you'll continue to have it. But I do think I would agree he's number 2 with a bullet. And the question is, my point to that is, if he does kind of have just this like 3,400 yards, 3,900 yards, 26 touchdowns, will that drag him back to the pack? Maybe. I mean, I do think he needs some impressive years down the road to continue to hold on to this number 2 spot that I think everybody would probably give him. I don't think it's like if he were hurt in an accident or something and couldn't play anymore and walked away, I think he'd be remembered as number 2, right? It would be a Terrell Davis, Gale Sayers, Jim Brown ducking out early. I think he would go down as number 2. But if he plays mediocre the rest of the way, that's going to water down the view of him. But the fact that before 30 years old, he's already the number 2, the consensus number 2 quarterback of all time is amazing. But I guess I would ask the question, does he have to do to become number 1?
Well, look at what Tom Brady's years in his 30s. His 30-year-old season is when he went 16-0 with 4,800 yards and 50 touchdowns at age 30.
Yes.
And you go through year by year what he did afterwards. At age 32, he's got 4,400 yards. At age 34, 5,200 yards, then 48, then 43. At age 38, he throws for 4,700 yards. He led the NFL in yards at age 44 and age 40 with 4,500 and then 5,300 yards. Like, his best statistical seasons did not happen in his 20s. And that's why Tom Brady has the resume he does. That's why he's been one of one.
Can we expect that to be the same for Patrick Mahomes, Jeff, that his best years actually lie ahead of him?
No, I don't see it, because his play style is so different. And if you want to play a long time in this league, you need to play the way Tom Brady played or Peyton Manning played, which is from the pocket and not exposing your body to hits. And Patrick Mahomes has been able to be fairly durable, but he's been banged up. He's had some injuries that have lingered and have been debilitating at times for him. And so as he gets deeper into his career, when that mobility begins to go, what's going to happen to those big numbers? And I always go back. I don't know if you saw this thing that Cooper DeJean was saying after the Super Bowl about how they wanted to play him. And he had a line that I thought was very revealing and almost eye-opening. He said, we wanted to make him play quarterback. And to me, that wasn't just, a soundbite. That probably was something that was echoed throughout the course of their preparation for Patrick Mahomes. And that may be a mindset around the league that he's not playing quarterback in the way that those other guys play it, like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. And so that's where the longevity comes in for him, is can he make that adjustment to being more of a in the pocket, throwing on time type player? Because Sam's right. I mean, it's those numbers that Brady put up were largely because, one, the offense was built around his skills, but two, like Peyton Manning did, they also went to teams that were loaded on offense late in their careers and had a chance to put up more numbers with better supporting cast.
Yeah, I think that's a good, if we're just, again, we're not talking about trying to win championships for the Chiefs. We're talking about his legacy, his career. And at some point, the Chiefs have got to load up on the offensive side. I mean, that's the Peyton Manning's career got a big boost statistically at the end because he got to a Broncos team that loaded up. Wes Welker, Demaryius Thomas, it got to a spot that had good offense, and then they loaded up even better around him. Tom Brady had that resurgence, those middle years where they had Randy Moss and Wes Welker, or I don't know, Edelman had come along. They found Rob Gronkowski. Presumably the Chiefs will just, eventually have better talent that keeps going there. I think that's going to be one of the things that's there to watch. And we'll get into how he can evolve here in a minute. What about the Super Bowl, Sam? What did the Super Bowl loss and him not playing well? Let's be clear. It's one of the worst games he's played. What did that do for this legacy? It obviously didn't have us knocking him out of the number 2 spot, but what did it do? What kind of damage?
Yeah, I mean, it'd be different if there was like another quarterback that was like marginally behind Brady's resume or something. I think like you would say, okay, now what about this argument for number 2? But it has to mean something that not only do you lose the game, but you're one of the reasons you lose the game, and it's a blowout. Like that game has to matter. But the part of this argument that annoys me is this record in the Super Bowl argument. It's the LeBron James versus Michael Jordan argument at that point. Like it matters getting to the Super Bowl, does it not? I mean, like, does Josh Allen have a better 2024 season, postseason, I mean, because he's 0-0 in the Super Bowl as opposed to being 0-1 in the Super Bowl? Like you do get credit for beating the Bills in the AFC Championship game to get back to another Super Bowl. At some point, championship appearances in sports should matter too, even if you lose in that final, whatever it is, the NBA, the Super Bowl, whatever it is. And so I still think this year as a whole should help his legacy because it's yet another Super Bowl appearance. It's the furthest any team had advanced after winning back-to-back Super Bowls. Like that part, when you look at his resume in 10 years, still should be a leading item. You got to the Super Bowl after winning 2 straight. But, the manner in which they lost, I don't think it's nothing. Even if it's a small part of that, I don't think you can say it doesn't matter at all.
Right. I think taking the loss, it wasn't going down valiantly where the other team had the ball last and you couldn't do anything. I mean, he got his ass kicked and he didn't play well. Right. Yeah. So I think it does hurt. But Jeff, I love Sam's point about like getting to the Super Bowl is better. Magic Johnson is not better than Michael Jordan because he didn't score better, but he was 5-3 in NBA finals, right? Not just 5. Jordan's 6-0 is wonderful, but getting to the finals 8 times means something, right? To the Sams, and I know he brought up LeBron, but I think back like Bird and Magic. I think Bird was 3-2 in the finals, or maybe he was 3-3 or something like that. I can't remember what it was. I was a Laker fan, so I know the Lakers stuff better. But they didn't hold that against those 2 guys, that they'd lost to those 2 guys, that they'd lost to each other, they'd lost to greats, and just to get there proved their greatness. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. What the Eagles do from here will affect his legacy. Like if the Eagles win another championship or go to another conference championship, if the Eagles look dominant and he gets back against them and beats them and now is 2-3 against the Eagles, that's going to help color the texture of what this game meant. And I think there's no doubt that the last, in the Patrick Mahomes starting era, the 49ers and Eagles have been the 2 best teams. And he's run into them 4 times in the Super Bowl and he's 3-1. I mean, I think that will be part of it as well. But for you, what did that Super Bowl do?
Well, I agree with Sam. It shouldn't erase what he's done. It shouldn't drop him to like 8th on the list. It shouldn't, stop people from talking about him as potentially having a chance to be the greatest of all time. All those things are still in play, but it certainly humanized him. And it's when you start talking about what separates great players, you're not talking about, well, just you got there. You have to get there. You have to play well. And so it does mean something that Joe Montana never had that kind of moment on that stage. It does mean something that Tom Brady never had that moment. It means something that John Elway had those kind of moments, and that Peyton Manning had those kind of moments. Those guys had tough games in those on that platform. And so
hang on, don't move off that Elway thing, because that's a great point, because his career is kind of Elway-esque right now. Elway was 2-3 in championship games. He's 3-2. Now Elway lost his 3 early when he was a better quarterback, got a better team around him, and won his 2 at the very end. So that dynamic is different. But as far as the kind of record, I was a believer and would say long before this, last 20 years, that I always felt like if John Elway played for the Niners, he'd have won everything Montana won and more. And that if Montana were on the Broncos, they maybe make one of those first 3 Super Bowls, and they certainly don't win it. I always felt Elway was the better quarterback. Man. And as I look back on it, I mean, I watched him play. He's not just numbers in a book for me, Sam.
Yeah. I watched him play.
Okay. I didn't know. You were probably crapping in your diaper when you did. How old were you when John Elway was playing? 99. How old were you? 98. How old?
I was a teenager already.
Okay.
I vividly remember John Elway.
Okay. I felt he was the better player to Joe Montana. And I look back on Elway and I look back at those Broncos teams, and what was around him was not much. And I think that'll be part of the equation. Do we look back on this Chiefs team and say, what a miracle he got that team to 15 wins? We know how many close games they were, and what a disaster of a roster it was for him to carry him there. Like, because, Chris Jones is going to go to the Hall of Fame, but he had 5 sacks. Like, if Chris Jones does not have more than 5 sacks the rest of the way, it's going to be like, yeah, they had Chris Jones, but he wasn't what he used to be. Who else on this roster? Travis Kelce? Travis Kelce was on the downslope of his career. Like, who else was the preeminent star that was playing their best football as you look around? Or is this going to be, as Travis Kelce walks away, if they end up walking away from Chris Jones after this year and it's not impressive, what he does this year, are we going to look back and say is it going to become one of the jewels in his crown? And he goes on and plays well in years to come and say he carried this team.
That's possible. We're talking about such different eras now that it's very hard to say what's going to happen 20 years down the road, how they're going to remember him, because I think that, as we said on this podcast many times, I mean, he's had some good fortune in the supporting cast around him. Like last year, they had a great defense that showed up big for him. Having Tyreek Hill earlier in his career was a big deal for him. And so the quarterback will always be remembered the most. But the point I was going to make about John Elway and Peyton Manning was that I think you become a supporting character in someone else's story when you lose a Super Bowl. And Sam's been there a few times. It's amazing how much the other team just shrinks at the end of the game. They go from they walk in like they're just King Kong, like they're just this dominant presence. Then by the end, they're just so small and so insignificant. And so that to me was weird for him in that game. I think for him, the biggest takeaway was that this was the one game, the biggest game he's played in, where there wasn't an excuse for why they lost. In Tampa, it was all these injuries and Andy's kid had gotten in trouble. This was the one game he played that meant the most, where not only did he not have an answer for the team, but he was overwhelmed and he had pretty much everything around him that he had all season long.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe the second half of the Bengals 21 AFC Championship game, but not one full game. No. Where it seemed to, and maybe not early because he did play better. They got some things going late and had some by the way points. So maybe that's unfair to say the whole game he was all, but the game was never a contest, and largely, and a big factor in that was that he played poorly before it really got going. All right, let's take a break. We want to get into what his letter grade was for this year. We'll do that after you hear from our friends at Gann Asphalt and Concrete. Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. Northland Injury Law, Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers, serving KC for more than 40 years, voted Kansas City's #1 accident lawyers, helping people with serious injuries from car accidents, work accidents, falls, and other personal injuries. Northland Injury Law doesn't get paid unless they get money for their client. Don't wait, get compensated now. If you have a case, text HURT to 22222. That's HURT to 22222 or call 816-400-HURT. That's 816-400-4878. The choice of a lawyer is an important one and should not be based solely upon advertisements. All right, let's get into the 24 season. Jeff, what kind of letter grade would you give the season for Patrick Mahomes?
Well, if I'm judging it off just his career, like using him as the barometer, it's a C. If it's everybody else in the NFL, it's probably B-, B. It was a tough year for him. Certainly I think his toughest year. I think last year you could write off a lot to the people around him and the plays they didn't make. This was a year where he didn't have a lot of help, but I don't think he played as I think he became more of a game manager. I think that's probably the best way to put it. I think he became more risk averse, which isn't bad in some ways, but the player, again, that we remembered 3-4 years ago, that was a lot more, cavalier, wasn't there. And so I think there's a number of reasons behind that. But again, this season and last season were the 2 years where I said, this is going to be tough for him he's not catching Brady statistically after watching these 2 years. I could see a lot more years like this coming down the road. Maybe not with the number of interceptions, but he's probably going to be closer to being a 4,200 yard, 28 touchdown player as he moves deeper into his career now than I would think he'd be a 4,800, 40 touchdown guy.
Sam, where do you sit on the? So what letter did you ultimately give him?
I gave him a B compared to the rest of the league, but C play based on his play, what we come to expect from him.
Sam?
Yeah, I gave him a C plus, and he did not have the best supporting cast. I think when you look at a supporting cast, you'd probably grade that like a D plus. Part of that is a lot of that was out of the Chiefs' control. I mean, Rashee Rice was his best weapon through the first 3 weeks of the season, and he was out, and that changed things. But and Travis Kelce took a step back, as we all anticipated he would this season, and the left tackle situation was a disaster. So he was not put in the best circumstances that he's been put in his career. But I think that this year taught him that there's stuff he himself, regardless of those circumstances, have to improve. And I know we'll get to that, but he's got some stuff on his list, based on this last season. Jeff mentioned something that I think is really important is he has to become more comfortable taking risks, because when you look at, the Tom Brady, middle-aged years of his career, when you look at Aaron Rodgers throughout his entire career, like they'll throw contested passes in a way that Patrick Mahomes does not like to throw. I mean, he had the fewest, tightest window throws in the entire NFL this year. And he's been, bottom 3 on that list for a while now. I think in order to evolve, that's got to become part of his game too. But his pocket presence wasn't great this year. I didn't think he had great circumstances, but I didn't think one game really stands out to me real quick. That Atlanta game, he had everybody on that Sunday night game. And there were a couple times this year, that game more than any, where I just looked at it and said, wow, he's off tonight. And I don't recall going through a season saying it as frequently as I did this year.
26 of 39 for 217, 2-1. 39 attempts and 217 yards speaks to it. What you're talking about. I don't disagree with the contested pass thing. I'll go back to something we talked about in the last podcast. Maybe getting some guys that can go win those kind of balls, right? Like 160-pound Xavier Worthy is not a jump ball winner, right? And I know he had a catch like that late in the year. And contested windows are not just throwing it up for grabs and your guy goes down and comes and gets it. Part of it is, and I've said it, in college football, you're open when you've got 2 yards of separation. In the NFL, if the DB stride for stride with you and the receiver's looking at the quarterback and the DB's not, you're open. You're supposed to go make a play. But the quarterback's got to give you a chance to make a play. But I do think that he would have better numbers if he were playing with a DK Metcalf or even just bigger physical Keenan Allen.
AJ Brown.
They did trade for DeAndre Hopkins midway through the year. I mean, that is supposed to be his strength, and
agreed.
They used him less and less and less every week.
Agreed. And I think part of that though is also Andy Reid. I think Andy Reid's become more comfortable with that, right? So yeah. And I think it's something that they need to evolve in as well. I will point out it was a really bad start to your point about the Atlanta game, but he piled up all these interceptions, and he was 20-2 over until the Super Bowl. He was 20 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and they were 10-1 in that 11-game stretch, including winning 2 playoff games to get to the Super Bowl. He really did kind of find his rhythm. It really is kind of the tale of 2 seasons. And early, except for the last game, looked like the beginning of the year. He had 9 interceptions through the first, 8 games. And then he had 2 the rest of the way until he got to the Super Bowl. And so I think the year was a little bit better because I think the left tackle position, and Jeff, to your point about, you're right, it wasn't a Buck situation, but Joe Thuney at left tackle with Mike Caliendo at left guard was a big drop off, maybe 40%. Let's call it 2 of the spots that had changed versus the Bucks. So I would be a little bit better. I like the B, like Jeff said. I'm like B. And I would probably even go B+. I think there's an element of, I remember Syracuse media getting on Boeheim about, Jerry McNamara shooting too much. And Boeheim going, we don't win 10 effing games without Jerry McNamara. Like, I think there is more than just the raw stats. And I think the times that he made people miss, like he was playing with Kingsley Suamati and Wanya Morris at left tackle. That was a problem all year. And through that stretch run of them going 10-1, he made it look like it wasn't really that big a problem. And we know it was a problem. So I think there was more of a hindrance. I'll say B to B+. If you pin me down, it's the only year he hasn't topped 4,000 yards. I guess I'll settle in it at B. You want to push back, Sam?
No, I mean, I think what you said is reasonable. I mean, I mentioned I thought his surrounding elements were probably in the D+ range. So if that overwhelms the grade, I think that's fine. You mentioned his last 9 games, and he did play better in his last 9 games. I mean, his quarterback rating goes to 99 in those games. He averages, and I want to put this in perspective for what we're talking about. He averaged 253 yards per game over those 9 games. He averaged 243 for the season. So there isn't a late season second half of the season improvement. That number, even if he had averaged 253 over the entire season, Tom Brady averaged more than that all last 12 years of his career. He was never below that number. Like, that's the bar that, we opened this show with, talking about, like, even that would have been the worst of the last 12 years on a yardage basis for Tom Brady.
So, Jeff, does he ever return to those prolific numbers that he had in 18 and 22?
I don't think he does. I don't think, which is not a bad thing. Those numbers are so through the roof. Like, it's very, how many guys, like 10, 12 guys in this league have 5,000-yard seasons, or there's been that many 5,000-yard seasons total. And so it's pretty rare to be up in that space. And again, you're not getting to those kind of numbers unless you're putting a lot of great players on the field. And I can't underscore this enough. Sam has said it. You've said it to a certain extent. When you don't have a Tyreek Hill or you don't have a Travis Kelce in your prime, it's a lot harder to put up big numbers. Because look at Joe Burrow. Like, how many times do you see Joe Burrow throw into a wide open Jamar Chase? And then how many times do you see him throw a ball 10 yards at Jamar Chase and he runs 70 yards with it? There's a reason why Joe Burrow led the league in yards and touchdown passes, because it's a lot easier to do that. And once you begin to take those players away, it gets harder. And so I can't think of a quarterback in this league that plays at a high level, an extremely high level, without great receivers, without a competent run game, and without great protection. And really, it is a fair point to say that he's playing without a lot of that stuff right now. And I look at just, it's a lot harder to fix those things when you don't have a ton of money in your salary cap and you don't have high draft picks. And that's really the challenge for them as far as dealing with him. I think those numbers are hard to reach, but it's even harder given their circumstances.
Will you see the prolific numbers again, Sam?
I think you'd be foolish to anticipate a 5,000-yard, 50-touchdown season because it's only been done twice by him and Peyton Manning. So that day, I think, is forever gone. I actually think the better question is, did we just see his floor? Is 3,926 touchdowns going to be the statistical worst season that we see from him? Because of what I just mentioned about Tom Brady. I mean, his last 12 years, he tops those numbers every single year in terms of yards per game. So have we seen a norm for Patrick Mahomes, or is this going to be his floor? And I actually do think that it's possible that we have just seen his floor. And it's for the reason that Jeff mentioned. I mean, when Rashee Rice went out and a 35-year-old Travis Kelce became their number one option, their whole offense is built on guys who can make plays after the catch. And they didn't have a ton of guys who could make plays after the catch. Like, their yards after the catch were skewered by the fact that they threw so short. They threw the shortest of any team in the NFL this year. And by the way, he still doesn't lead the league in yards after catch the way he did in past years. So they didn't have receivers who could help him elevate those numbers. I do think the return of Rashee Rice, a second year of Xavier Worthy, I think they will help that. I don't think the Chiefs are going to be getting worse at wide receiver than they were last year. I don't think they're going to get worse at left tackle. So I think that's the better question: is this the floor that we just saw from Patrick Mahomes?
And you would vote yes, it is the floor.
I would vote yes.
Jeff, do you think it's the floor?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I think it is the floor. I do think you'll see. I think at some point the draft will just work out, the free agency will work out, and they will have better talent. I think you'll see some big numbers. You're right. Probably not 5,050 because it just hasn't been done much, and the games are getting shorter as far as the number of plays, just because the ball's not being dropped and, the clock starting on out of bounds. Like, I think it's hard to put up those kind of ridiculous numbers these days. But I think we're going to see, he might get to 5,000 and he might get to 50. I don't know whether they'll do them both in the same year, but I think we'll see a couple more 40 pluses on the touchdowns. And I think we'll see mostly, 4,500 plus in the yards. So I think he will get back there. Where does he need to evolve, Jeff, in the next stage of his career?
Well, I go back to what Cooper DeJean said, which is people are going to make him play quarterback. They're going to keep him in the pocket. They're going to rush with four defenders. They're going to play a lot more exotic coverage, drop more guys into coverage. And if they're not going to adjust and use the run game more and design more stuff that makes that strategy futile, he's going to have to be like Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. And again, this sounds like it's really shitty to say, but it's like, I don't know if he sees the game as well as those guys see the game. Like, and to me, that's about throwing the ball on time, identifying where you want to go. Now, you can argue that schematically, they're not creating this slot receiver position where you can get these easy throws that Peyton Manning and Tom Brady had throughout their careers. But it was very apparent in that game against the Eagles. And throughout the season, to be honest with you, there were other times it didn't happen. They just won, and we didn't talk about it as much. But he didn't see things as well. And he missed receivers. And maybe that's him hunting the big play. That's maybe people confusing him more than we want to realize and recognize. But that, to me, is the biggest thing he's got to improve upon. He's got to be able to see things on time, get the ball out, and be comfortable in the pocket, way more comfortable than he's ever been. If he can't run around, things change dramatically. Yeah.
How about you, Sam? Where's he evolve?
Yeah. So on that particular point, it's an interesting thing because I talked to Patrick Mahomes. I think it was after the Chargers game. So what would that have been? Week 4. And went through how he sees the field. And he acknowledged that I actually think it's because he's become too educated on things that he's cut off part of the field before the snap because he sees the coverage they're in. He recognizes the way they're going to play it because let's face it, the Chiefs see a lot of similar coverage. It's seeing a safety momentum start to backtrack before a snap to where he says, this play right here is not going to be open. So let me turn my attention to here. And like, that's not a bad thing to be processing information that way. But even by his own mission, he said, I can't cut off half the field before the snap even comes to me. And that happened on to where this play that he was analyzing this, to where I asked him the follow-up questions. This was that deep ball to Xavier Worthy. He said before the snap, everything in his mind said, this play shouldn't be open, but I'm just going to throw it in. Because remember how bad that game was going before that Xavier Worthy deep ball? He said, I'm just going to throw it anyway. Like, I'm tired of this. I'm just going to throw it anyway. And so he did it. And there was a clip by NFL Films where Matt Nagy went to the sideline and they showed it, and he's saying F it mentality. He's cussing, but he's saying F it mentality. He's got to have some of that, to where he says, I'm going to throw this ball anyway because I believe my arm is good enough to do it. And he'd be right about that. And he's got to be willing to say, I'm going to throw the ball deep because I can throw a good deep ball. And if the guy's covered, then I'm still going to give my guy a chance. But like, so I think that's an interesting part of the way Jeff dissected the way he looks at the field, because that's, to me, the part that he could potentially alter. And then I agree with everything he said on the pocket presence thing. Like, people are going to make him have really good pocket presence. Where that really illuminates is when you're not getting rushed by more than 4 guys. You do have time, but the clock in your head says you shouldn't have any more time. Where we saw Josh Allen, why he won the MVP, is because in those situations, he's willing to say, I'll just stand here. If you guys aren't pressuring me and I've got time, I don't care that you should have gotten to me by now. You haven't gotten to me, so I will stand. Go back and watch them beat the Broncos in the playoffs. That's all those plays. I could see teams rushing Patrick Mahomes the way the Eagles did frequently, to where he's got to tell himself, it's okay to stay in the pocket. I don't have to bail yet, even though time says I should have to bail.
I know he's not the pure speed runner that Mike Vick is, but he's more of a scrambler like Mike Vick. Right? Like, Josh Allen is, I know, a better runner than Ben Roethlisberger, but his presence in the pocket is more Ben Roethlisberger. He is more of a pocket quarterback. And what I wonder is, and then you have guys like Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, who were never athletic and always had to figure out the game from the pocket. They were not going to beat people and escape. We watched John Elway be athletic enough to be able to escape and make plays with his legs, and then lose that and become a pocket passer. So we've got examples where you can be an escape artist, lose that ability, and then transition into the Manning Brady. But I don't think that's a given, right? And I think, to your point, Sam, about that clock is a great one, because I don't know. I like, we asked, is this halfway point? I could see 36 being it for him, that if he does not learn to live, like if he can't just be patient and wait and wait and wait and wait the way those guys do, and he keeps trying to escape and he loses his legs, he's going to look like Sam Darnold did in the playoff game. Like, they pressured Sam Darnold. His eyes started going around. He wasn't looking down the field. And then he started feeling ghosts and he started moving around. So it's going to be something he's going to have to train himself. To your point, Sam, that's an instinct thing. He's going to have to retrain instincts. Yeah. And I think Andy Reid's going to have to give him, who is not Lindo White, the outlet that Brady threw 80 passes to. You're going to have to give him someone.
James White.
Yeah, James White. But you're going to have to give him a guy like that, and then he's going to have to take it. And so I think there's a lot of things he's got to train against what is his natural instinct. And I think he's such a competitor. He's tough enough. I want to believe that he will do it, but I don't think you can guarantee he's going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, his instincts trained him for years that scrambling was a good move, because he was so effective moving out of the pocket. With the way the teams have started to play him, you're right, Soren, that he's got to reverse that training. But it's hard, because you don't train blitzing a ton, for example. Like, you're not getting hit at all until the season starts, to where my point is, this is an easier said than done thing. Like, I can understand why this has been a difficult transition as defenses have played this way, because you see it in games and really only in games.
Yeah. And I think Sam was there when he was answering the question after the Super Bowl about how teams are going to play him and him learning how to control himself. And I thought that he had a very revealing line. I'm not going to say it the way he said it, but it was basically like on that interception return, the pick six to Cooper DeJean, he said, like, I'd like to make plays to get my team going, to get the momentum going. And so when he scrambles, I think that's a part of him. I want to do something that gets guys fired up. I can run around and pump my fist and do all this stuff. And now we're going. It's like, no, sometimes you got to get 3 yards. So you can have like a manageable down the next one.
I think that's a great point, Jeff. Like, I think one interesting question that I have about Patrick Mahomes is, does this aura about him being this, the magic of Patrick Mahomes, the guy who makes the plays that you've never seen before, does it sometimes hurt him? Because that's a reputation that you want to live up to. And defenses aren't allowing him to make the magical plays. And therefore, do you search for him in times when it's really not the best thing to be searching for?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Don't forget, you can use promo code podcast25 to save 25% on your entire order at Besame Wellness.
Besame Wellness for all your cannabis needs. With fast, easy, and discreet delivery, you can enjoy the same deals you enjoy in-store, but delivered to your home or office. Even same day. Restrictions may apply. Any questions? Let Besame's top-rated customer service team assist you. And this Chiefs season, don't miss a minute of the game with no delivery fees on game days. And when the home team wins, so do you. Use promo code 3PEAT and receive some extra free goodies with your next Besame order. Don't forget, you can still use promo code podcast25 to save 25% on your entire order for online delivery or at any of their 5 area Besame locations.
Gann Asphalt and Concrete, proudly serving the greater Kansas City area. Nationally recognized full-service paving and pavement maintenance contractor. Locally owned and making parking lot problems disappear in Kansas City since 1994. Let Gann educate you about the most cost-effective way to solve your parking lot problems. With free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews, and every project comes with a written warranty, Gann Asphalt keeps your parking lot safer and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find Gann online at GannAsphalt.com or call 816-484-3338. Gann Asphalt and Concrete. One contractor, all things parking lot. All right, let's talk about are the Chiefs putting enough around him? Sam, do you believe that they have put enough around him to help him?
Last year, no. I think part of that, like I said, was out of their hands just because Rashee Rice got hurt. And that was, to me, going to be a major focal point of their offense. And I think it's to be determined this year. It's really hard, I think, for any of us to predict what Jalen Moore is going to be at left tackle this year, including the Chiefs. Like, you only have 12 games to go by. I think it's difficult to say this guy is for sure going to have this floor, for sure going to have this ceiling. He's going to fall somewhere in between. I think that's a difficult proposition. And to me, so much of that question of what they put around him is, how do you protect him? Because they did not protect him nearly well enough last year. I don't think any other quarterback gets through 17 games last season with the offensive line that Patrick Mahomes had. Like, that alone should have been considered an accomplishment. And you've got to protect him better to answer that question well. Like, you can have all the receivers in the world. If you can't protect him better, then that question to me is still in doubt.
Jeff?
Yeah, I often wonder, did they get lucky with Donovan Smith and Orlando Brown? And they started to believe that, okay, we can make this work no matter who we're going to put in there. But I agree that you have to start there as far as the improvement goes. And what's scary about the Jalen Moore situation is that if he's not good, if he is in the same category as a Wanya Morris or Kingsley Suamataia at that spot, you don't have an insurance policy now, unless there's somebody out there they're going to pick up that we don't know about yet who could fill that void that Joe Thuney filled. So that to me is very concerning. And as far as receivers go, yeah, it's very hard to gauge what they have outside of Travis, who I think we know what he is, what he's been, and where he's at in his career. But the sample size and really the circumstances for all these guys that we're talking about, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, and Hollywood Brown, it kind of skews the perception of what they are, because Rashee Rice was asked to do more as a rookie and then got hurt. We didn't see much of him after his third game last year. Xavier Worthy had to play a more prominent role. towards the end of last season. Hollywood Brown was hurt. So, like, what are they really supposed to be? That's what I keep asking myself. Like, I think they all have their talents and their potential, but, like, it's hard for me to get my head around what are they going to look like at their best. And so I still think there's a mystery there about what they have a receiver.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, agreed. I think one of the things that's making it harder is, like, I think teams are all getting better at, like, Mitchell Schwartz would never get on the open market nowadays, right? Offensive tackles come flying off the board because of the premium. You don't get quality offensive tackles in the second round. I think Jalen Moore may be the recipe. You've got to find a team under duress, cap-wise, that can't, keep the younger player. And it may not work. He may suck. I agree with Sam said. 12 games, you got an idea, but it's going to be so hard. You're going to have to find this diamond in the rough that you can go out, or you're going to have to overpay for okay and then do everything right around it. So I think it is getting more and more difficult to answer the question that, yes, we are putting enough around him. I do think they need to focus on the offense. And sometimes I think for Andy Reid, I think head coaches like to be the tough guy that says, just get it on the other side of the ball. I'll scheme it up over on my side. They're going to have to put offense around him. One, to keep him happy, and two, I think scoring is more important now than ever before in the NFL. No Travis Kelce. That's coming, Jeff. How does that change the equation?
I think it's dramatic. And I'll be curious to see how this season plays out. Like, if Patrick makes that adjustment before Travis is gone. That, to me, is the positive thing that could happen. Whereas if he's willing to say, I'm going to other people, I'm not looking for Travis in these big moments, I don't have to get him his touches, I'm not going to run around as much and try to find him when he's improvising. If there is a decided change in Travis Kelce's spot in the pecking order, I think that allows Patrick Mahomes to have a much more seamless transition into life without Travis. And again, it's very hard to have played your entire career with one of the best players ever at his position and then automatically say, I'm going to start, moving away from that into something else. And the thing that's been very apparent about Patrick, is that when he trusts you, he will throw you the ball in any kind of situation. And that was the way it was with Tyreek. That's the way it's been with Travis. And Sam has made points about him not throwing the ball to Xavier Worthy in these situations, or we saw Rashee Rice in the Super Bowl. Like, I just don't know if he trusts those guys with the same level of confidence. And that can come around when Travis is gone, but he's going to miss Travis and that improvisational ability that Travis had to make things happen when things broke down.
I wonder if losing Travis Kelce, Sam, doesn't make him better at all the other things we're talking about. He needs to get better. He doesn't have a security blanket. He doesn't run around just trying to, like, I know Travis will get open. Does that make him more disciplined? Could that actually make him better when he loses the security blanket?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff mentioned the word trust. What really struck me about that is I talked to Brett Veach like a couple days before the Super Bowl, and he talked about Xavier Worthy's late season growth. And he said he didn't trust Xavier Worthy early on. Then he said, well, I don't want to say trust. It wasn't trust. It was that he didn't have a feel for him. That's what he has with Travis Kelce. Yeah. He has a feel for
or trust. I think trust might have been the right word.
Well, I think the difference I think early on it probably is trust. I think the difference in those two things are the Chiefs have so many option routes that you have to be on the same page at all times. And he had a feel for what Travis just straight out ran routes that weren't even one of the two options all the time. But Mahomes just has a feel for that. And so what changes to me is key downs. Third downs change more than anything. Since 2018, when Patrick Mahomes entered the league, he has the best quarterback rating on third downs of any quarterback who's thrown at least 18 passes on third downs. 110. He's got by far the most touchdowns and most yards. Some guys haven't played, every game since 2018, the way Patrick Mahomes has. But what else pops out about third downs is Travis Kelce's numbers are ridiculous in that same time frame since Patrick Mahomes came in. He's third in first downs. He's like fifth in catches. So to me, that's what changes. And the gotta have it plays, Travis Kelce has been the answer. And there will come a time, probably, a year from now, where he can't be your answer anymore. And then what changes? Where do you go after that?
Jeff, what's reasonable to expect in his next 8 seasons?
I think he'll definitely get to at least one more Super Bowl. and have a chance to win one more. I thought that he would win 3 when he took off. I could see him getting 4. I don't know exactly when that's going to happen. I think statistically he will get back to closer to where, like I said before, I think the Sam put it best. This past year was the floor for him. I think he'll be more in the 4,300 yard range per season. I don't see him catching Brady at all. If you look at, I was doing some numbers with where he's at right now. If he averaged 4,500 yards and 40 touchdowns, or maybe 35 touchdowns, the next 8 years, he would still be like 20,000 yards behind Brady and something like 200 touchdowns behind him. Brady is so far statistically ahead in that category. But, Sam brought up the question about what Brady did late in his career winning championships. I don't think Andy Reid's going to be here beyond 5 years. Travis is going to be gone. Chris Jones is going to be gone. He'll put the numbers up, but what's going to allow him to win championships and why it's hard to see that is, are they going to continue to find not just good players, but generational players to put around him? And that's the question I can't answer.
Yeah. Sam, what do you expect the next 8 years?
Yeah, pretty similar as Jeff. I think the championships I might alter. I do think he gets another Super Bowl sometime in the next 8 years, and I would predict 2 Super Bowls before I'd predict none over the next 8 years. But the numbers thing, I don't know where the argument is that Patrick Mahomes is going to catch Tom Brady on the numbers, because.
Well, I'll just tell you, I did a thing. If he played till he was if he played 20 years, and he averaged what he was averaging before this year, he would come right up to where Tom Brady is. Right now, he's unlikely to play 20 years, and he's already this year not averaging what he has been averaging. But that would be the argument. I'm just telling you, that would be the argument.
Yeah.
That and that Tom Brady's better statistical half of his career was the second half. That would be the other one. Those are outliers, right?
Yeah.
Now that's norm.
Yeah. And I know you're not saying that's your argument, but no. I always point this out, that we have to stop treating Tom Brady as though every quarterback after him is going to do what Tom Brady did. There's a reason he's one of one, and that is the reason, is because he continued to play well at ages that nobody in history had played well. Patrick Mahomes is 36% of the way there on his yards, for example. And he's on a pretty similar number with his touchdowns as well. I don't see him catching the all-time numbers that Tom Brady put up in touchdowns and yards and that sort. And I don't see him catching Super Bowls either. But if you predicted 3 more Super Bowls for Patrick Mahomes, I think you should take it if you're Patrick Mahomes. But that still falls short of Tom Brady, right? And so then suddenly, are we therefore slighting the guy for saying you're not? No, it's not a slight to say you're not, that we don't think you're going to catch Tom Brady. I still think like I said, I predict 2 Super Bowls in the next 8 years before I predict 0.
And we can fold in our last question, which is, where does he rank all time when it's over? Because I think these are kind of intertwined. And I would say this, I think the bigger question is, what would it take for you to say he's better than Tom Brady?
Yeah, I agree.
Right? And then work backwards from there. Because I don't think he has to win 8 or even 7. I think you can get there, because I pointed out Michael Jordan won 6, Bill Russell won 10, right? And, he was the ultimate winner. But Michael Jordan took that crown without winning more championships. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar scored more points, had more MVPs. There are, I don't think you have to top all the numbers, but you can't fall short in all of them. What is the dynamic that would have you saying? And I think the dynamic would be, if they frankly started putting all their resources into the offense, and he started carrying the number 22 defense and the number 18 defense to championships, if he's winning them late on his last second drives, more fourth quarter heroics. And I'm not saying this is a blueprint that the Chiefs should follow. I'm just saying I think this is what it would take, because I agree with both of you guys. I don't think the longevity is going to be there. I don't think the counting numbers are going to be there. So how would he do it? I think it's unlikely that he's going to get to 8 or even 7 Super Bowls. So how would you, at the end of the day, look at him and go, this guy's better? They need to become a purely almost Dan Faucian offensive team that wins championships as well. and that you could point to and say, Tom Brady had a top 10 defense every single time he won a championship. This guy won 4 championships without it, and I don't think that's a plan anybody wants to put into action. So I think at the end of the day, he's likely to be number 2. He's likely to be where he is, but solidified at number 2 that definitively no one's there. And maybe even a chance for Chiefs fans to at least carry on a coherent conversation to argue that he belongs at number 1. But I think in all likelihood, he's going to be number 2 when it's all said and done. Jeff?
You know what it would have helped? You know what it helped that? A three-peat. A three-peat would have been something that Tom Brady had never had.
How about beating Tom Brady head-to-head in the playoffs? He's 0-2. That is a killer. It is I agree. Things that Brady hasn't done is what he's going to have to do. Now, he's got the 5,050, but he might need 2 or 3 more 50 touchdown seasons, or 2 or 3 more 5,000-yard seasons, or the most, put together the most MVPs. And that's a hard thing to do because of how voters go. Listen, I will be thrilled if we can one day sit here on this podcast and say he's number 1, but I just can't. It's hard to find the path to get there. Yeah. I think he finishes definitively 2 with an argument for number 1, because I'm with you. I think he gets to 4 or 5. Outside shot at 6, but more like 4.5 is where I'd put the over-under at on Super Bowls. And so I think it'll be tough to just point at numbers, Jeff.
Well, I think he ends up 2, first of all, but I do agree that, again, there's no guarantee that he'll get to any moving forward. And
see Dan Marino.
See Dan Marino, or see Tom Brady for 10 years, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I think what would separate him or give him a shot to catch Brady in the court of public opinion would be playing at a high level deep into his career. That's the thing that you have to come back to on Tom Brady, is what he did in his late 30s, in his 40s. Not just the championships, but the numbers, going to another franchise that had not won a championship in 2 decades.
And being the reason they won, not along for the ride like Peyton Manning's last championship.
Yep. And because we forget, no matter how great the players are, as they get older, recency bias settles in, and we kind of forget how great they were, and we start looking at what they are. Like, people look at Aaron Rodgers now, like, oh, he's trash, he's washed. They forget about what he was 7-8 years ago. He got 2 MVPs back to back. 3 or 4 years ago. Russell Wilson, we watched him and we're like, he can't do it. And that begins to pervade the memory more so. So the things that Mahomes is doing now, if he's not going to be doing those things when he's 38, 39 years old, but if he's doing things at a high level at playing this position, he will get the credit. He'll be in the argument. But if he's fading fast down the stretch, I don't think there's ever a shot he's going to be in the same conversation.
Where does he finish, Sam? You get last call.
Yeah, I think second as well. I mean, like I said, I think it's going to be hard to catch the numbers and individual statistics, and I think it's going to be hard to catch the Super Bowls. And therefore, even if, Soren, I think you're probably in this boat. I think when it's 8 years from now, 15 years from now, whatever it is that however long he plays, I think I could see you and I, particularly Soren, saying he's the best quarterback I've ever seen. But it'd be much harder to make the argument that he's got the best resume that any quarterback's ever had.
Yeah, I agree. That's the way it looks. Listen, we love doing the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast, and we love everybody watching. You can help support us by supporting our great sponsors like GAN, Asphalt, and Concrete. Free consultations, no commissions, in-house crews. Every project comes with a written warranty. GAN Asphalt keeps your parking lot safe and helps you and your business avoid unnecessary delays and costly expenses. Find them online at GANAsphalt.com. One contractor, all things parking lot. Remember, if you're hurt in an accident, Kansas City's Google 5-star rated personal injury lawyers. Our Northland Injury Law, serving Kansas City for more than 40 years. Text HURT 22222. That's HURT to 22222 if you have a case. And of course, Besame Wellness. Use that promo code podcast25 to save 25% on your entire order. That's podcast25 to save 25% on your entire order at Besame Wellness. For Jeff Chadiha from the NFL Network, NFL.com, Sam McDowell from the Kansas City Star, I'm Soren Petro saying thank you very much for joining us here on the Red, Gold, and Bold podcast.